Mr. Elliot.
Mr. Lieberman, will you accept my assurance that I do not wish to add further to your distress?
Thank you, Mr. Elliot.
It must be very painful for you to come into court and make these accusations against two people as close to you as your son and Mrs. Savage.
There seemed to be no alternative.
Be that as it may, I'd like to say on behalf of my client that in everything except the matter of the flat, you've shown a remarkable generosity.
If it's the clothes and the jewellery you mean, I'm quite happy for her to keep them. But the flat is a somewhat more expensive item.
Of course, even to a man as rich and generous as yourself. You remember, don't you, when your son, Mark, was obliged to fly back to London on business, leaving you and Mrs. Savage on the yacht together? On that occasion, you gave your son a large present, did you not?
It wasn't a present. He told me that he was in trouble with his business. He's always in trouble with his business.
Or perhaps it was intended as a loan.
Perhaps it was. But I didn't get it back.
It was, I believe, £5,000.
Yes.
You knew that once Mark received this money, he would fly back to London immediately to sort out his business problems, leaving you and Mrs. Savage alone together.
Are you saying that I gave my son a bribe? That's unworthy. That's terrible.
I must put it to you, Mr. Lieberman, that the effect of this present on Mark was to remove him from the scene.
If he said that, then
I'm suggesting, you see, that even at that moment, having fallen in love with a woman much younger than yourself, you were looking on your son as some kind of rival.
That's not true.
Well, you do admit, Mr. Lieberman, that jealousy may sometimes be unreasonably aroused.
Not in my case. I'm a very reasonable man.
Even in love, Mr. Lieberman?
I believe so, yes.
Well, any reasonable man arriving in London unexpectedly would telephone his fiancée from the airport, would he not?
I must object.
I'll rephrase the question, my lord. Why did you not telephone Mrs. Savage from the airport?
I said it before. I thought it would be a surprise for her.
It wasn't because you thought you might catch her with her lover?
No.
Mr. Lieberman, when you arrived at the penthouse, did you ring the bell, or did you use your key?
I used my key, of course.
Well, you seem to have jumped to conclusions with remarkable speed, Mr. Lieberman.
What does that mean?
Well, it would appear that you almost expected to see something improper going on.
I have told the court what I saw. He came out of her bedroom naked.
You think carefully, Mr. Lieberman. Are you sure he was naked?
Sure. Am I sure? Sure, I'm sure. He was stark, staring nude.
My lord, I shall bring evidence to contest this. In the meantime, I would like to refer the witness to the plan of the flat submitted by my learned friend. Now, as we can see, the master suite comprises a bedroom and a bathroom. Anyone coming from the drawing room who wished to use the bathroom would have to pass through the bedroom. Now, Mr. Lieberman, did it occur to you that your son Mark was on his way back from the bathroom?
He has a flat of his own. Does he have to cross the town, go up a lift 32 floors to use his father's bathroom?
Yes, there's 32 floors, Mr. Lieberman. At the time of these events, were they occupied?
No.
What, this enormous office block was empty?
Except for the security staff and a few guard dogs, yes.
And it was completed how long before?
Oh, 2.5 years, more or less.
Don't you find that remarkable? A building that, according to the press, cost more than 15 million to put up, and 2 years later it's still without a tenant.
Not remarkable. That's the property business.
Oh, I see.
There were several deals, but they fell through. Imperial Electronics, the Central Bank of Canada, Transocean Airways.
It's most unfortunate for you. Except, I suppose, that the value of these office blocks in central London goes up continually.
That may be so.
My lord, what possible relevance has this matter to the case in hand? My friend asked this question for the sole purpose of exciting rancour and prejudice among the jury, whom we were so anxious to impanel in this case.
I must say, Mr. Elliot, I was myself wondering where you were taking us. What connection can there be between the value of office blocks and the relationship of these parties?
I hope to show, my lord, that there is, in fact, a very close connection.
Oh, very well, Mr. Elliot.
Thank you, my lord. Now, Mr. Lieberman, at the present moment we know that the penthouse is occupied by Mrs. Savage, but that the rest of the building is empty. Is that right?
That is correct.
You know, there's been some criticism in the press of these large blocks remaining untenanted on the grounds that the full rates cannot be levied on them as long as they stand empty.
I don't take much notice of the press.
In Parliament as well, there have been suggestions that not only should the full rates be levied on these buildings, but that a surcharge of 50% should be paid on top of that.
Yes, I've read something like that, but it's quite iniquitous in my opinion.
It was no more iniquitous, perhaps, than tearing down old buildings in order to raise these concrete blocks which then stand empty for years until their value has risen to many times what they cost to build.
Why? Is it a crime to make a profit?
Yes, it may be. It may be if you ruin a city in the process.
Well, that certainly doesn't apply in the case of Green Park House. I think it's a very beautiful building, and it won't stay empty much longer.
Oh, so at last you found a tenant?
I believe so, yes.
You cannot, of course, disclose the name of the company.
Yes, but I am rather reluctant to do so in public at this moment.
Yes, I thought so. But it is a company.
Yes, a large international concern.
Whose board of directors, no doubt, would be proud to occupy such a beautiful and expensive building.
Well, I hope so.
With a penthouse on top, complete with swimming pool. You see, Mr. Lieberman, what I'm suggesting is that it may be important to you to get Mrs. Savage out of the penthouse, not only for the sake of your poor broken heart, but also for your pocket.
That's quite untrue.
Well, it may be easier to find a tenant for the building. It may be easier to find a tenant for the building if there is vacant possession of the penthouse.
That may be so, but
this is not why you've brought this action, Mr. Lieberman.
Certainly not.
Let us return to your evidence. You say, when you saw your son in the flat, you were very angry.
Very angry, yes. And upset.
So upset that you were unable to speak either to him or Mrs. Savage.
What could I say?
There was, in fact, no conversation between you until you telephoned that afternoon when you said, "Don't argue with me, Delia. You've been sleeping with that boy." What was she arguing about?
She told me that I was mistaken.
Well, she protested her innocence, in fact, and you refused to listen to her.
I was shaking. And I was crying. I told you that I was very distressed by all this. I've told you all this.
Not too distressed to call your private detective and ask him to eavesdrop on the conversation. I put it to you, Mr. Lieberman, that then, as now, your chief concern was not for your broken engagement, but for your property.
My chief concern, Mr. Elliot, was for my honour.
Do you wish to examine the plaintiff, Mr. Fry?
Mr. Lieberman, at the time of these distressing events, that is, on the 27th of May this year, did you know of any company that was interested in bidding for the leasehold of Green Park House?
No.
With or without
I did not.
The penthouse and the swimming pool which has so inflamed the imagination of my learned friend?
No. Most certainly not.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. You may stand down.
When His Lordship, the Honourable Sir Arthur Desmond Waddington, resumes the case tomorrow, it is expected that Mr. Fry will conclude the case for the plaintiff by calling Sidney Abbott, Emmanuel Lieberman's private detective. Mr. Elliot will then open his case by calling the defendant herself, Mrs. Delia Savage, to the witness box. Lieberman versus Savage, continuing tomorrow in the Crown Court.